Welcome to Easy English Official. Today, we have an inspiring story that will not only help you learn English but also motivate you to overcome fear, build confidence, and take bold steps toward your dreams. This is the story of Lena, a young learner who once felt trapped by her own doubts, afraid to speak even a single sentence in English. She worried about mistakes, feared judgment from her classmates and family, and often thought that learning English was impossible. But Lena's journey shows us something important. No matter where you start, small steps, consistent effort, and courage can lead to transformation. In this video, you will follow Lena's journey from hesitation to empowerment. You'll see how she struggled at first, practiced every day, faced setbacks, and gradually discovered the joy of learning through stories. You'll experience her frustrations, her small victories, and her ultimate triumph in a way that is simple and easy to understand for English learners at A2 B1 level. Along the way, you'll pick up listening skills, new vocabulary, and useful phrases that you can practice yourself. Stay with us until the end, because Lena's story doesn't just stop at her success, it shows how learning English can open doors to friendship, opportunity, and even helping others. By watching closely, you'll not only improve your English but also feel inspired to take your first step or your next step with confidence. So, let's dive into Lena's story and discover the power of persistence, courage, and storytelling in learning English. The weight of fear. Lena sat at the small wooden desk by her window, her notebook open, but her mind was somewhere else. Outside, the morning sun touched the rooftops of her small hometown, painting them gold, yet inside her heart, she felt a gray shadow. She had always dreamed of traveling, of working in a place where people spoke English, where her words could connect her to the world. But every time she tried to imagine herself speaking fluently, a wave of fear stopped her. What if she made mistakes? What if people laughed at her? What if she was not good enough? These questions spun around in her mind like restless birds, leaving her anxious and unsure. Every day at school, she watched her classmates raise their hands confidently, speaking in English during lessons. Their voices seemed to float effortlessly, light and free. Lena's own voice felt heavy and uncertain. When she tried to answer a simple question, her tongue tangled, her words stumbled, and she quickly muttered, "I don't know," even when she did know the answer. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment. She wished she could vanish, slip out of the classroom unnoticed, and hide her fear forever. After school, Lena walked home along the narrow, dusty streets lined with small shops and houses with peeling paint. She passed children playing in the yards and neighbors greeting each other warmly. She smiled, but it felt empty. The life around her seemed alive and vibrant, yet she felt stuck, like a bird in a cage. She longed to join the world outside her small town, to travel, to communicate, to share her ideas. But the language barrier felt like a wall she could never climb. At home, her family was kind but had little understanding of her dreams. "Why don't you focus on something more practical?" her father often said. "English is not necessary here." Her mother would nod, adding, "You should be careful. People might make fun if you speak badly." Their words, meant to protect her, felt like another weight pressing on her chest. She wanted to explain, to tell them about her dreams, but the fear of failing, even in her own home, held her back. Lena tried practicing on her own. She repeated phrases from old textbooks, listened to audio recordings, and tried to memorize new words. Sometimes she would whisper them to herself at night, hoping they would stick. But the words often felt meaningless, disconnected from her real life. She wanted more than memorization, she wanted connection. She wanted to feel the words in her heart and see them work in the world around her. And yet, fear clung to her like a shadow. Every mistake reminded her of what she could not yet do. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, Lena sat with her tablet, scrolling aimlessly through the internet. She stumbled upon a channel filled with short English stories. The thumbnail showed a smiling teacher and a caption that read, "Learn English through real stories." She hesitated. What if she could not understand anything? What if it was too difficult? But something inside nudged her forward. She tapped the first video. The voice in the video was calm and gentle, telling a story of a young person, just like her, who had once been afraid to speak English. The sentences were slow, clear, and repeated for beginners. Lena felt a flicker of hope. She listened closely, repeating the words aloud, stumbling over some, getting others right. For the first time, learning English felt less like a chore and more like a bridge to a world she had only imagined. The story made her smile. She realized that even small steps could lead somewhere, that fear did not have to stop her entirely. That night, Lena could not sleep. She thought about the words she had learned, the stories she had heard, and the tiny spark of courage growing inside her. She realized that her fear had been strong, but her curiosity and desire for freedom were stronger. For the first time, she imagined herself speaking English with confidence, connecting with people far beyond her town, and sharing her thoughts without hesitation. The wall that had seemed so tall before now looked climbable, step by step. Lena promised herself that she would take one small action each day. She would listen, repeat, and practice, even if only for a few minutes. She understood that the road ahead would not be easy, that mistakes would come, and embarrassment might return. But she also understood that fear was not a sign of weakness, it was a sign that she was trying. And trying, she realized, was the first step toward freedom. The next morning, she returned to her small desk by the window, notebook in hand, and played the story video again. Each sentence felt a little more familiar. Each word she spoke felt like a tiny victory. The gray shadow of fear had not vanished, but it no longer held her completely. Instead, it was a companion she could acknowledge and move past, one word at a time. As Lena repeated the phrases and smiled at her own voice, she felt the first real spark of hope. And a sense that perhaps, just perhaps, her dreams of freedom were within reach. Lena did not know exactly where this journey would take her, but she had discovered something more important than any vocabulary list: the courage to begin. And with that courage, she was ready to take her first real step into the world of English, listening carefully, speaking bravely, and believing in herself, one story at a time. The first step: facing the unknown. The next morning, Lena sat at her desk, tablet in hand, and took a deep breath. The sunlight streamed through the window, falling on her notebook filled with scribbled words she barely understood. Today, she told herself, would be the day she tried something new, something that scared her just a little. She clicked on the first English story video she had discovered the night before. The calm voice of the narrator filled the room. At first, the words sounded like a distant melody, strange and unfamiliar. Lena felt the familiar pinch of fear in her chest. "I won't understand this," she whispered to herself. She pressed play again, slowing the video. This time, she repeated the words aloud, her voice trembling. "Hello, my name is Lena." The words felt heavy and awkward on her tongue. Her cheeks warmed with the discomfort of speaking aloud, but she kept going. She knew that every small attempt mattered, that courage was not the absence of fear but the choice to act despite it. She repeated the same sentence 5 times, stumbling over each word, but gradually, each repetition felt a little smoother, a little more confident. Lena began a small routine. Each morning before school, she would play a short story video, listen carefully, and repeat the sentences. At first, she could barely catch a single word. "Good morning," she said once, and then again, carefully stretching each syllable. The word felt like a small victory, almost magical in its simplicity. By evening, she could remember 2 more words from the story, friend and happy. She smiled at herself, feeling a spark of hope she had not felt before. For the first time, learning English felt like a series of small doors opening one by one, instead of a wall she could never climb. Not every attempt was easy. Sometimes the words tangled on her tongue, and she would stop, frustrated. "Why is this so hard?" she asked herself. She wanted to give up, to close the tablet and forget about the strange, foreign sounds. But then she remembered the feeling of the narrator's voice, calm and encouraging, as if saying, "You can do this. Take it slow. One word at a time." Lena realized that each small mistake was part of learning, not a reason to quit. The contrast between her frustration and the tiny successes became a lesson in patience. As the days passed, Lena's confidence grew slowly but surely. She noticed that she could understand a sentence more fully than before. When the video said, "I like to read books," she could repeat it almost perfectly, and she understood the meaning without looking at a dictionary. That small comprehension made her heart leap. It was as if she had crossed a hidden bridge, stepping from confusion into understanding. She began to look forward to these short, daily sessions, savoring each moment when a word or phrase finally made sense. Her family noticed the change, too. Her younger brother watched her repeat phrases aloud and mimicked her, giggling. Her mother peeked into the room, asking softly, "Are you learning again?" Lena nodded, smiling, a little shyly, but proud. She understood that learning English was no longer just a personal dream, it was something she could share with the people around her, even in small ways. The contrast between her early fear and this quiet joy felt profound. Something she had once thought impossible was now beginning to feel natural. Lena also began practicing writing the words she heard. She copied phrases into her notebook, slowly tracing each letter, connecting sounds with symbols on the page. When she read them aloud afterward, the words sounded familiar, like old friends returning. The routine, simple as it seemed, started to form a rhythm in her life. Fear was still present, but it no longer dominated her thoughts. Each day brought a new challenge and a new small success, building the foundation of confidence she had never experienced before. One afternoon, as she repeated a sentence about a young boy helping his friend, Lena noticed a new feeling: pride. She had understood nearly every word, and she had spoken it aloud without hesitation. The struggle that had felt so heavy only a week ago now seemed lighter. She realized that her courage was growing, not because she had suddenly become fearless, but because she was choosing action over fear. Every word repeated, every sentence understood, was proof that she could improve. The repetition, the small victories, and the patient effort began to change the way Lena saw herself. She was no longer just a frightened girl who avoided English class. She was someone taking control of her own journey, step by step. The contrast between her old self, paralyzed by fear, and her present self, willing to try, willing to stumble, willing to learn, felt like a quiet triumph. Each day, she felt a little stronger, a little braver. By the end of the week, Lena could understand a simple story almost entirely on her own. She could repeat most sentences without hesitation and even explain the meaning of a few words to her brother. Sitting at her desk, she looked at her notebook, full of scribbles, corrections, and small successes. She realized something important: consistent effort was the key. Fear would still be there, but it did not have to stop her. She had discovered a path forward, a simple and steady way to move from fear to courage, one story at a time. Lena leaned back in her chair, feeling a quiet sense of hope. She knew the next step would be harder: speaking English in front of others. Her heart beat faster at the thought, but it no longer stopped her. She understood that the practice she had done, the courage she had nurtured, and the small victories she had earned were preparing her for what was to come. She smiled softly, whispering to herself, "I can do this." And with that thought, she felt ready to take the next step into a wider world of learning, listening, and speaking. The first challenge: speaking in public. Lena's heart pounded as she walked into the small classroom where the local English-speaking club met. The room smelled faintly of chalk and books, and a circle of chairs had been arranged in the middle. Her palms were sweaty, and her stomach twisted nervously. She had imagined this moment countless times, but now, standing at the threshold, reality felt heavier than she expected. What if she said something wrong? What if everyone laughed? The fear she had carried for so long tightened around her chest. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. Several members smiled politely, nodding at her introduction. "Hello, my name is Lena," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Immediately, she felt the weight of every mispronounced word. "Hello, my name." "Lena," she stammered, her tongue tripping over the familiar sounds she had practiced alone. A few eyes blinked politely, some slightly confused, and Lena's cheeks burned red. She wanted to shrink into the nearest corner and disappear. The first exercise was simple: each member had to say one sentence about their day. Lena's turn came quickly. Her mind went blank. I like, the school," she mumbled, uncertain. The room was silent for a moment, and she heard the faintest hint of a stifled giggle. Her chest tightened. A wave of embarrassment washed over her, and for a second, she considered leaving. Maybe this wasn't for her. Maybe she had been too ambitious. The fear she had carried alone now felt magnified, reflected in the eyes of others. Just as she began to shrink inward, a gentle voice interrupted her panic. "It's okay, Lena," said the mentor, a kind woman named Mrs. Patel. She smiled warmly, leaning slightly toward her. "Mistakes are part of learning. Every word you speak, even if it is not perfect, is a step forward. Keep going. You are doing great." The warmth in her voice was like a soft light breaking through the storm of Lena's fear. She nodded, wiping her sweaty palms on her skirt, trying to take in the encouragement. The mentor guided her gently. "Say it slowly," she suggested. "You can do it. I'll repeat after you if you want." Lena took a deep breath and tried again. "I like school," she said, slower this time, each word more deliberate. The room was patient, and when she finished, the mentor nodded with a bright smile. "Excellent. You said it clearly. That is progress." Lena felt a small spark inside her chest, a feeling she had almost forgotten: pride. Even in the midst of fear and embarrassment, she had spoken. She had acted. After the exercise, the group moved on, but Lena lingered in thought. She replayed the moment in her mind, feeling the contrast between the humiliation of her first attempt and the gentle encouragement that followed. She realized that fear was not a signal to stop, it was a signal to try. The mentor's words echoed in her head: mistakes are part of learning. Each misstep was not failure, it was a lesson, a tiny piece of the path toward fluency. Over the next few sessions, Lena returned to the club regularly, each time feeling a little braver. She began to memorize simple sentences and repeat them aloud before her turn. She practiced her pronunciation in front of the mirror, whispering and then gradually raising her voice until it sounded clearer. The contrast between her initial trembling and these small moments of confidence was stark. She began to notice the feeling of courage growing quietly inside her. Fear was still there, but it no longer had the power to freeze her completely. One day, during a group conversation, Lena finally spoke a complete sentence without hesitation. "I enjoy reading books in the evening," she said, her voice steady. The room responded with nods and smiles, and a few members even repeated the sentence with her. Lena felt a warmth in her chest, a mix of relief and pride. The embarrassment of her first day no longer seemed so threatening. Instead, it had become a stepping stone, a memory that reminded her how far she had come. She remembered her early practice at home, the countless times she had repeated sentences from videos, struggling to understand even a single word. That patient effort had prepared her for this moment. The bridge between fear and confidence had been built slowly, one small repetition at a time. The mentor's gentle guidance had shown her that support, encouragement, and persistence could transform fear into action. Lena began to see mistakes not as evidence of inadequacy but as proof that she was learning. By the end of the month, Lena's confidence in the club grew noticeably. She could introduce herself, ask questions, and respond to simple prompts without freezing. The contrast between her trembling entrance on the first day and her calm, practiced sentences now was remarkable. The fear that had once been overwhelming was now a companion she acknowledged but did not let control her. Each meeting reinforced a simple truth: courage is built in moments of discomfort, and every small step forward is a victory. Lena left the club one evening, walking through the quiet streets toward home. She replayed the events of the session in her mind and smiled. She had stumbled, she had been embarrassed, and yet she had spoken. She felt lighter somehow, her heart buoyed by the small victories she had earned. The mentor's words stayed with her: mistakes are part of learning. Lena understood, deep in her heart, that the next step, speaking even more confidently, perhaps in front of larger groups, was possible. Fear would still appear, but she now had the courage to meet it. That night, as she lay in bed, Lena repeated her favorite sentence from the club aloud one more time. "I enjoy reading books in the evening." She whispered it slowly, savoring each word, feeling the confidence in her voice. She thought about the first time she had spoken in the club, how frozen and anxious she had been. And she realized something important: she had moved from fear to action, from hesitation to courage, one sentence at a time. The path was still long, but now she could see it clearly, step by step, ready for the challenges and triumphs that awaited. Small victories, learning through stories. After her first shaky experiences in the English club, Lena returned home that evening with a mixture of excitement and lingering nerves. She knew she wanted to improve, but the thought of speaking alone in front of others still made her stomach twist. That night, she opened her tablet and searched for something new, something that might help her connect words to real life. That was when she discovered story-based learning videos, English lessons woven into real-life tales of struggle, hope, and growth. The thumbnails showed people smiling, talking, and sometimes facing challenges, and the titles promised short, clear stories with beginner-friendly sentences. The first video she clicked on told the story of a young boy who had always been afraid to speak English, just like her. As she listened, the narrator's voice spoke slowly and clearly, repeating each sentence twice. "I am learning English. I want to speak with my friends." Lena repeated the words softly, over and over, until her tongue felt more comfortable with the rhythm. She didn't just memorize the words, she began to understand their meaning and the emotions behind them. She felt the boy's fear and excitement, and in that, she recognized a piece of herself. Lena made a small routine. Each morning before school and each evening after finishing homework, she would play a new story video. Sometimes the stories were about children learning to read, sometimes about people overcoming fear, and sometimes about friends helping each other. She listened carefully, repeating phrases aloud, sometimes pausing the video to say a sentence slowly and clearly. Each repetition strengthened her understanding and confidence. The words started to feel familiar, less like a foreign language and more like tools she could use to express herself. At first, comprehension was limited. Lena could catch simple words, but she struggled with full sentences. She would rewind the video, listen again, and try to match the sounds to the text on screen. Each time she succeeded in understanding a sentence, she felt a small surge of pride. The contrast between her early confusion, where every word felt heavy and meaningless, and this new clarity was striking. Every sentence she could understand became a tiny victory, proof that consistent effort was starting to pay off. One story told of a girl who was nervous about meeting new people. Lena repeated the phrases, "I am shy, but I want to make friends. I can try." As she spoke them, she felt the words resonate inside her, as if they were giving her courage. She began to connect not only the sounds of the words, but also the emotions they carried. Fear, hope, determination, these were not just vocabulary, they were experiences she could feel and practice expressing in English. The stories became mirrors for her own journey, teaching her both language and life lessons simultaneously. Lena noticed that her pronunciation slowly improved. Words that once felt impossible to say were now forming more naturally on her tongue. She recorded herself sometimes, listening carefully and comparing her speech to the narrator's. Each corrected mispronunciation felt like a small step forward. The routine of listening, repeating, and reflecting created a rhythm in her life. Fear no longer felt paralyzing, it was a gentle push reminding her that she was learning, that she was growing. After several weeks of consistent practice, Lena felt ready to test her new skills. She returned to the English club with a fresh sense of purpose. During a small group activity, she began a conversation with another learner, Ravi, who had also been practicing with story-based videos. At first, they spoke slowly, repeating words and phrases carefully, but soon they understood each other more clearly. "I like reading," Lena said, and Ravi smiled, repeating the phrase back. The exchange was simple, yet it felt like a breakthrough. For the first time, she had a successful conversation in English with someone outside her family or the videos she practiced with. The joy of understanding and being understood was immense. Lena realized that language was not just about memorizing words, it was about connecting emotions and meaning with communication. The contrast between her early attempts, where she could barely say a sentence, and this successful conversation was remarkable. Confidence, she discovered, was built through repetition, patience, and the willingness to embrace small victories. From that moment, Lena began to see English not as a distant, intimidating wall, but as a bridge she could cross one small step at a time. She became more attentive in class, more willing to volunteer answers, and more confident in her own abilities. She noticed that her fear still appeared, but now it was accompanied by curiosity and determination. Each story she listened to was like a small lantern lighting the path forward, helping her move from uncertainty toward clarity. The story-based videos also taught Lena the power of empathy. As she listened to stories of people overcoming challenges, she understood that mistakes were natural, that struggle was part of growth, and that courage was something cultivated, not innate. She began to internalize these lessons, repeating encouraging phrases to herself: "I can try. I can speak. I can learn." The words became her mantra, carrying her forward into the next stage of her journey. By the end of the month, Lena could understand short stories almost entirely. She could repeat sentences with correct pronunciation and even explain their meaning to Ravi. The contrast between her first hesitant attempts and her growing fluency was clear and inspiring. She felt a quiet sense of pride, the joy of progress, and the excitement of new possibilities. The daily practice of story-based learning had transformed her fear into confidence, her hesitation into curiosity, and her struggle into meaningful progress. One evening, after finishing a story about a young girl overcoming shyness, Lena and Ravi exchanged a few sentences in English about their favorite lessons. Lena laughed softly as she realized she could express herself clearly, convey meaning, and connect with another person. It was the first time she had experienced the true joy of communication. In that moment, she understood something essential: consistent effort, guided by stories that speak to both the heart and the mind, could transform fear into courage and learning into freedom. She smiled, feeling the quiet power of small victories leading toward a larger journey yet to come. The setback: when confidence falters. Lena had been feeling proud of her progress. Her story-based learning videos, daily practice, and small victories in the English club had all built a quiet confidence inside her. She could speak a sentence, understand simple conversations, and even hold short exchanges with fellow learners. For the first time, she imagined herself truly using English in the real world, beyond her small town and her own quiet room. She felt ready, almost eager, to take on a bigger challenge. That opportunity came unexpectedly. One afternoon, Lena received an invitation for an online interview with a language exchange platform. The goal was simple: introduce herself and answer basic questions in English, speaking clearly enough for a native speaker to understand. Her heart raced with excitement, but as she read the instructions, the old fears crept back. What if I make mistakes? What if they laugh? What if I sound foolish? She paused, hand hovering over the keyboard, trying to steady herself. She reminded herself of all the practice she had done, all the stories she had repeated, all the sentences she had finally said aloud with confidence. The interview began, and Lena took a deep breath. "Hello, my name is Lena," she said, carefully enunciating each word. For a moment, the connection felt perfect. But then the first question arrived: "Tell me about your favorite childhood memory." Lena's mind froze. She had rehearsed simple sentences, but this question demanded more than repetition. It required spontaneous thought in English. Words tangled in her tongue, ideas scattered in her mind. I when, I play is school, no, playground, she stammered, her cheeks flushing. The interviewer asked a follow-up question, and Lena tried to respond. Her sentences were fragmented, her pronunciation uncertain. She felt her confidence crumbling. She imagined the interviewer raising an eyebrow or smiling politely but thinking she was not capable. Her frustration rose sharply. "Why can't I do this?" she thought, her chest tightening. "I've practiced so much. I know the words. I should be able to answer." But in that moment, the gap between practice and real-life speaking felt enormous, and it left her feeling small and incapable. When the interview ended, Lena closed her laptop slowly, feeling a heavy mix of disappointment and shame. She stared at the ceiling, replaying every awkward sentence, every stammered word, every moment she had felt exposed. For the first time in weeks, the fear she had learned to manage returned in full force. Her heart sank. "Maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe I shouldn't even try," she whispered to herself. She wanted to throw away the progress she had worked so hard for, to give up entirely. The contrast between her recent confidence and this crushing setback was overwhelming. That evening, Lena sat in silence, replaying every moment of the interview in her mind. She felt anger at herself, regret for not preparing more, and doubt about her abilities. It seemed that all the hours of practice, all the small victories, had vanished in a single experience. She remembered the mentor's advice from the English club about mistakes being part of learning, but this felt different. This was real. This was high stakes. Her courage felt fragile, almost broken, and she wondered if it was possible to regain it. Her phone buzzed softly, and she saw a message from her mentor, Mrs. Patel. It was simple: setbacks are temporary. Fear will pass, and your effort will continue to matter. Don't give up. You can do this. Lena read the message again and again, feeling the warmth in the words seep into her chest. The reminder that fear is temporary, that mistakes do not define her, brought a flicker of hope. She realized that this setback, as discouraging as it felt, did not erase her progress. It was only a pause, a momentary challenge in a longer journey. Lena reflected on her previous experiences. She remembered the first day at the English club, when she froze and mispronounced simple sentences. She remembered repeating story-based lessons over and over, struggling to understand one sentence at a time. And she remembered the joy she had felt when she finally held a successful conversation with Ravi. Each of those moments had begun with discomfort, fear, and uncertainty, and yet she had pushed forward. This setback was no different. It was simply another moment to face, another chance to grow. The contrast between despair and hope became clear to her. She could allow herself to give up, to let fear win, and lose all the progress she had made. Or she could acknowledge the difficulty, accept the frustration, and try again. The mentor's gentle encouragement reminded her that fear does not last forever, and that courage is something she could choose, even in the midst of failure. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar tension in her chest begin to loosen. Lena knew what she had to do. She could not erase the awkward sentences of the interview, but she could use them as fuel. She decided to review her practice materials, repeat her story-based lessons, and prepare for another opportunity. She told herself that this moment of struggle was not the end, but a step toward greater strength. Each word she had learned, each sentence she had repeated aloud, each small victory was still a part of her. The setback had reminded her that progress was not a straight path, but a journey of ups and downs, of courage and learning intertwined. That night, Lena whispered to herself before sleep, "Fear is temporary. I will try again. I can speak English." She understood that disappointment was part of the process, but hope was always within reach. The next day, she would return to practice, to the stories that had brought her joy, to the exercises that had built her confidence. The interview had shaken her, but it had not defeated her. With determination quietly burning in her chest, Lena felt ready to continue her journey, knowing that real growth comes not only from success, but from facing setbacks with courage. Recommitting with courage. After the disappointment of the online interview, Lena felt the familiar weight of doubt pressing on her shoulders. For a moment, she considered slowing down, giving herself permission to rest, to avoid the discomfort of failure. But deep inside, she knew that hesitation would only delay her dream of speaking English confidently. She remembered the joy she had felt in small victories. The sentences she had finally spoken aloud, the conversations with Ravi, the sense of connection and pride in her progress. That memory became a spark, a quiet reminder that she was capable, even if the path was challenging. The next morning, Lena returned to her story-based lessons with renewed determination. She set aside time for listening, speaking, and reading exercises every day, treating them as her personal mission rather than a chore. She noticed the difference immediately. Listening to stories no longer felt like decoding mysterious sounds. Instead, she began to grasp the meaning of entire sentences, catching the emotion in the narrator's voice, the subtle shifts in tone, the connections between words and feelings. Words that had once seemed foreign were now coming alive in her mind, carrying both meaning and energy. Lena's speaking practice became more confident and natural. She repeated phrases aloud, but this time she experimented with variations, trying to express the same idea in different ways. She found herself correcting her own pronunciation, adjusting rhythm and intonation, and even experimenting with small conversations with herself in front of the mirror. The fear that had once stopped her from speaking freely began to fade. Each sentence she completed felt like a small victory, and the contrast between her earlier hesitation and her emerging fluency was striking. Reading practice, too, took on new life. Lena read the stories she had listened to aloud, connecting the written words with the sounds she had practiced. She noticed patterns in sentence structures, learned new vocabulary naturally, and started to predict meaning from context. The shift was subtle but profound. No longer was she a passive learner, she was actively shaping her understanding, noticing the flow of language, and feeling the confidence that comes from mastery. The isolation she had once felt sitting alone, repeating words in a quiet room, began to dissolve. She was part of a growing community of learners, connected through stories, progress, and shared struggles. One afternoon, Lena encountered a younger learner struggling with pronunciation in an online group. The boy was nervous, stumbling over words just as she had months before. Without thinking, Lena gently guided him, repeating phrases slowly and encouraging him to try again. The gratitude in his eyes reminded her of her own journey, the mentor who had guided her, the encouragement that had kept her moving forward. Teaching someone else gave her a new sense of empowerment. She realized that helping others reinforced her own knowledge, turning fear into confidence, isolation into connection. As days turned into weeks, Lena noticed that her sentences were longer, her responses more spontaneous. She could answer questions without overthinking, express opinions clearly, and even share short stories of her own in English. Her confidence grew not in leaps, but in steady, deliberate steps, each one building on the last. She reflected on the contrast between the girl who had first walked into the English club, trembling and unsure, and the learner she had become, brave enough to speak, to try, and to guide others. With each accomplishment, Lena's mindset shifted. Mistakes no longer carried the same weight of shame, instead, they became learning opportunities. Mispronunciations, forgotten words, or incomplete sentences were simply part of the journey. She understood now that language learning was not a linear path but a series of challenges and recoveries, small successes and setbacks, all shaping her growth. This insight brought a sense of calm and determination, replacing the anxiety that had once dominated her learning. Emotionally, Lena felt lighter. The fear that had been so strong during the online interview had diminished. In its place, a steady courage had grown, one that acknowledged risk but refused to be paralyzed by it. Each practice session reinforced the belief that she could face challenges, make mistakes, and continue moving forward. The contrast between despair and hope became a vivid marker of her progress. The learner who had once been hesitant, frozen by fear, was now capable of action, resilience, and growth. As her confidence grew, Lena began to imagine bigger goals. She thought about participating in public speaking events, engaging with larger groups of English speakers, and even sharing her story to motivate others. The idea that had once seemed impossible, the dream of speaking English confidently in front of an audience, now felt within reach. Her daily practice had transformed not only her skills but also her mindset. She was no longer defined by fear, but by the courage to act, the patience to learn, and the empathy to support others along the way. One evening, as Lena reviewed a story she had listened to dozens of times, she realized that she could now understand the plot entirely, repeat dialogue naturally, and even explain the lesson in her own words. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming. She felt a deep joy in progress, a quiet pride that came not from external validation but from witnessing her own growth. She smiled, feeling empowered, connected, and ready for the next challenge. Lena's recommitment had transformed her daily routine into a journey of empowerment. Fear was no longer a stopping point, it had become a signal to act, to persist, and to grow. She understood that courage was built not in moments of perfection, but in steady, consistent effort. Her journey from doubt to confidence, from isolation to connection, was unfolding with every sentence she spoke, every story she read, and every lesson she shared. With this renewed focus, Lena was poised for her next great challenge, her first major public speaking event, a step that would test not only her English but her courage and resilience. Stepping on stage. Lena had never spoken in front of a large group before. The invitation to present at a local community event felt both thrilling and terrifying. As the day approached, her mind raced with doubts. What if I forget my words? What if my pronunciation is wrong? What if they laugh at me? Her stomach twisted with anxiety, her hands trembling slightly at the thought of standing before an audience. But beneath the fear, there was also a quiet determination. She had prepared, practiced, and learned steadily for months, and now it was time to apply everything she had learned. On the morning of the event, Lena arrived early. She observed the room filled with people chatting, smiling, and settling into their seats. The faces seemed friendly, yet her heart pounded. She found a quiet corner and closed her eyes, taking slow, deep breaths, just as she had practiced during her personal exercises. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. She felt the rhythm of her body, a steady anchor amidst the storm of nerves. With each breath, she reminded herself, fear is normal. Courage is choosing to act despite fear. Lena reviewed her speech mentally, recalling the key sentences she wanted to say and the stories she would share. She remembered the phrases she had practiced repeatedly through story-based learning videos, the dialogue she had repeated aloud, and the short conversations she had had with fellow learners. Each memory was a small building block, reinforcing her readiness. She spoke quietly to herself, "I can do this. I know these words. I have practiced." The repetition of these affirmations created a sense of stability, allowing her confidence to grow alongside her nerves. When it was time to step on stage, Lena's legs felt slightly unsteady. She adjusted her posture, standing tall despite the butterflies in her stomach. The lights were bright, the audience attentive, and for a moment, the world felt enormous. She felt her hands shake, her heart race, but she remembered a technique her mentor had taught her: focus on the first word, the first sentence, the first thought. Start small. Then let the rest flow naturally. The microphone felt cold against her hand, but Lena exhaled and began. "Hello, my name is Lena," she said, her voice quiet at first but clear. She paused to breathe, feeling the rhythm of each word, carefully pronouncing them as she had practiced. The first few sentences were simple, but as she continued, something remarkable happened. The fear that had tightened her chest began to loosen. She realized that the audience was listening, not judging. Their attention created a connection, and with it, a gentle encouragement that carried her forward. She shared a story about a time she had struggled to speak in the English club, repeating words incorrectly and feeling embarrassed. She described the frustration of her online interview and the setback that had made her doubt herself. Each sentence was carefully constructed, spoken slowly, with pauses for emphasis, allowing the audience to follow along. As she spoke, she remembered the countless hours of practice, repeating story-based lessons, listening attentively, speaking aloud, correcting herself gently. Those months of effort gave her the foundation she needed to express her experiences clearly. Lena noticed a few smiling faces in the crowd, nods of understanding, and the quiet energy of people connecting with her words. That simple recognition gave her courage. She told another story, this time about helping a younger learner with pronunciation, and she felt pride swell inside her. She was no longer speaking solely for herself, she was sharing knowledge, encouraging others, and demonstrating that effort and persistence could transform fear into achievement. With each sentence, Lena felt her confidence grow. Trembling had given way to steady movement, doubt to determination. Her voice strengthened, her posture stabilized, and her rhythm became natural. She articulated words carefully, using pauses for emphasis, emphasizing key phrases she had practiced for months. The contrast between her first hesitant words and the full sentences she now spoke with clarity was remarkable, both to her and to the audience. As she reached the final part of her speech, Lena took a deep breath and looked around the room. She shared a short motivational message: mistakes are part of learning. Fear is temporary. If you try every day, you can grow and succeed. The words felt powerful as they left her lips, connecting with the listeners. She noticed the warmth in their eyes, the attention, and the silent encouragement. The applause began slowly, then grew louder, filling the room with a sense of shared achievement. When she stepped back from the microphone, Lena felt a rush of triumph. Her heart still raced, but the fear had transformed into exhilaration. She had done it. She had applied everything she had learned, faced her anxiety, and succeeded. For the first time, she felt the tangible power of her own growth, the strength built through practice, persistence, and courage. The audience's applause was more than recognition, it was a confirmation of her own belief in herself. Lena left the stage with a new sense of self-confidence. Her hands were steady, her steps light, and her heart full of possibility. She understood that this moment, while extraordinary, was also a reflection of her ongoing journey. Fear would return in other situations, challenges would appear, but she now had the tools to face them: deep breaths, careful preparation, courage, and the knowledge that consistent effort leads to triumph. As she returned home that evening, Lena reflected on the journey from hesitation to achievement. The nervous, trembling girl who had once doubted every word she spoke had grown into a confident learner capable of sharing her voice with others. This speech was not the end, it was the beginning of broader life changes, new opportunities, and the realization that learning, courage, and perseverance could transform fear into success. She smiled quietly, feeling empowered, inspired, and ready for whatever came next. A world opens up. After her successful speech at the community event, Lena's confidence grew in ways she had never imagined. The trembling, anxious girl who had once feared speaking even a single sentence in English now felt a quiet strength coursing through her daily life. Opportunities that had once seemed distant or impossible were beginning to appear before her. One afternoon, while browsing online, she discovered a part-time teaching position for beginner English learners. It was a chance to practice speaking, share knowledge, and earn some income, all from the safety of her small room in her hometown. At first, Lena hesitated. She remembered the nervousness of speaking to the community crowd, the mispronunciations in her first English club meetings, and the fear of being judged. What if she wasn't ready? But then she recalled the journey that had brought her here, the countless hours of story-based learning, the patient guidance of her mentor, the small victories that had gradually built her skill and self-belief. Taking a deep breath, she applied for the position, imagining herself helping learners who were just like she had been months ago, full of hope, but filled with doubt. When Lena received the email confirming her new teaching role, her heart raced with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. The first day arrived quickly, and she found herself sitting before her laptop, seeing the faces of students from all corners of the world. There were children and adults, shy learners and curious beginners, each with a unique story and language goal. Lena greeted them warmly, introducing herself slowly and clearly, choosing words she knew they would understand. She felt the familiar tension in her chest, but she also felt a strong sense of purpose. Every pause, every repetition, every careful pronunciation became a bridge connecting her to these learners. Teaching was transformative. As Lena guided students through simple exercises, corrected pronunciation gently, and shared short stories, she realized the immense power of language. English was no longer just a subject she studied, it had become a tool for connection. Through words, she built friendships, shared experiences, and explored cultures she had only imagined before. Her students smiled when she explained a tricky phrase, laughed at small mistakes, and celebrated their own progress. With each lesson, Lena felt the thrill of seeing learning take root, and she understood the profound impact of her effort. Beyond teaching, Lena began to see the world differently. Conversations with international students sparked curiosity about other cultures, ideas, and perspectives. She learned phrases, expressions, and idioms from people living in countries she had only read about. Simple greetings turned into longer exchanges, short sentences into meaningful discussions, and her confidence grew steadily. The contrast between her past limitations, quiet, anxious, unsure, and her present freedom, speaking, teaching, connecting, was remarkable. Each day reminded her of how far she had come, and how far she could still go. Lena's daily routine shifted as well. She allocated time for teaching, for her own practice, and for reflection on what she was learning from her students. She documented their questions, the phrases that tripped them up, and the ways she could explain ideas more clearly. In this process, she discovered new insights about her own learning. By helping others, she reinforced her knowledge, deepened her comprehension, and strengthened her communication skills. English had become a two-way bridge, bringing knowledge to learners while bringing growth and understanding back to her. Emotionally, Lena felt a profound sense of liberation. The isolation she had once felt, sitting alone in her room repeating sentences aloud, had been replaced by connection and purpose. She could express herself, listen to others, and feel the joy of mutual understanding. Moments of frustration still appeared: technical issues, hesitant students, or mispronounced words, but these no longer felt like failures. They were opportunities to adjust, to guide, and to grow together. Each interaction reminded her that fear was temporary and that persistence opened doors that fear alone could not. As Lena continued teaching, she also noticed changes in her dreams. No longer confined by the boundaries of her small hometown or the limits of her initial English skills, she began imagining bigger goals. She envisioned traveling, working abroad, and creating more opportunities to share her knowledge with learners worldwide. Her life felt expansive, filled with possibilities that had seemed unreachable just months before. English had not only opened doors, it had expanded her imagination and her courage to pursue ambitions beyond what she had thought possible. One afternoon, after finishing a lesson with a particularly shy student who had managed to pronounce a difficult sentence correctly, Lena felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The student's pride mirrored the pride she felt in her own journey. In that moment, Lena realized the importance of giving back, of mentoring and encouraging learners as she had been encouraged. It was a full-circle moment, the fear, the struggles, the small victories, all leading to the ability to empower others. She saw that her learning was never just about herself, it was about creating a ripple of confidence and growth that extended beyond her own experience. Lena's life, once defined by limitations and anxiety, was now marked by opportunities, friendships, and self-expression. English had become a bridge to the world, a bridge to new experiences, and a bridge to herself. She had transformed fear into action, hesitation into empowerment, and isolation into meaningful connection. Each lesson taught, each conversation held, and each story shared reminded her of the power of persistence and the joy of learning. As she prepared for her next session, Lena thought about the new learners who would join her. She felt excitement, responsibility, and gratitude. The journey was far from over, but she now embraced each step with confidence. The world that had once seemed distant and unattainable now felt accessible, welcoming, and full of potential. And within this expanded world, Lena understood that the greatest growth comes not only from learning but also from sharing, mentoring, and inspiring others to take their own steps toward courage and achievement. Guiding a new learner. One afternoon, Lena received a message from Ravi, a beginner English learner who was struggling with confidence. He was shy, hesitant, and full of doubt, reminding Lena so much of herself just months ago. She remembered the trembling girl who had once feared speaking a single word in public, the anxiety before every lesson, and the small victories that had built her confidence step by step. Seeing Ravi's uncertainty, she felt a deep empathy and a desire to guide him, knowing exactly how transformative support and encouragement could be. Lena began their first session by sharing her own story. She spoke slowly, choosing simple words, describing the fear she had once felt when speaking in class or during online interviews. She explained the long hours of practice, the repeated mistakes, and the small successes that had gradually shaped her skills. Ravi listened quietly, his eyes wide with curiosity and hope. Hearing someone else's journey, someone who had walked the path he was on, seemed to ignite a spark inside him. He realized that growth was possible, that fear was not permanent, and that mistakes were not failures but steps toward improvement. Together, Lena and Ravi started story-based English exercises. Lena selected short, emotional stories with clear context, so that Ravi could connect words to feelings and actions. She read a sentence aloud, and then encouraged him to repeat it slowly. At first, his pronunciation was hesitant, words stumbled awkwardly from his lips. Lena did not interrupt or correct sharply, instead, she smiled gently, offering subtle guidance. "Try saying it again," she would suggest, demonstrating patience and kindness. She emphasized understanding the story, not just memorizing words, helping him see language as a tool to connect with ideas and emotions rather than as a test. As sessions continued, Lena noticed small signs of progress that brought her immense satisfaction. Ravi began to recognize familiar words, repeat sentences with improved pronunciation, and respond naturally to questions. The first time he correctly said a short phrase without hesitation, Lena felt a quiet, warm joy. It reminded her of her own early victories, understanding a single sentence in a video, repeating a word correctly, or speaking in the English club for the first time. The contrast between Ravi's initial fear and these small achievements mirrored Lena's past journey, reinforcing the transformative power of consistent effort. During their sessions, Lena encouraged Ravi to express himself freely. She asked him questions about his day, his hobbies, and his dreams, prompting him to use English in meaningful ways. At first, he paused often, searching for words, worried about mistakes. But Lena's patience and genuine interest created a safe space. He realized that expressing thoughts, even imperfectly, mattered more than flawless pronunciation. Slowly, Ravi started forming complete sentences, describing his experiences, and telling small stories of his own. Each success deepened his confidence and strengthened the bond between teacher and student. Lena also introduced listening exercises from story-based videos they had used earlier. She explained context before playing each clip, helping Ravi anticipate vocabulary and themes. After listening, they discussed the story, repeated phrases aloud, and connected emotions to words. Ravi's comprehension improved steadily, and Lena watched with quiet pride as he began predicting dialogue, understanding idioms, and enjoying the rhythm of English sentences. It was not just learning words, it was learning to feel them, to inhabit the language emotionally and intellectually. One session in particular stands out in Lena's memory. Ravi struggled with a story about perseverance and self-belief, stumbling over several sentences. Frustration flashed in his eyes, and he looked down, almost ready to quit. Lena leaned forward and spoke softly, "Ravi, I know it is hard, but remember I was once just like you. Every mistake you make is a step closer to speaking freely. Take a deep breath, and try again." She shared a personal anecdote about the time she had mispronounced words in her first English club meeting and the encouragement that had kept her going. Ravi listened, inspired by her honesty, and slowly, carefully, repeated the sentences. That day, a breakthrough happened. Ravi formed his first full sentence confidently, "I want to learn English every day." His voice was strong, and a bright smile spread across his face. Lena's heart swelled with pride. This moment was more than a sentence, it was a symbol of transformation, of hope, and of courage. The journey from hesitation to self-expression, from fear to confidence, was unfolding in front of her eyes, and she realized that the ripple effect of learning was real. Her past struggles had become the foundation for someone else's growth, creating a cycle of empowerment and motivation. Lena reflected on how far she had come. She remembered the girl who had trembled before speaking, who had feared every mistake, and who had once doubted her own abilities. Now, she was guiding someone else, sharing her story, and providing encouragement that was grounded in experience. The contrast between her past and present was profound. Fear had become guidance, doubt had become reassurance, and isolation had become connection. Every sentence Ravi spoke reminded her of the lessons she had learned, the mentors who had supported her, and the value of giving back to others. Over the next few weeks, Ravi's progress accelerated. He began anticipating words, forming longer sentences, and even helping peers in their small online group. Lena continued to support him gently, offering praise, feedback, and encouragement. Each session was a reminder of the power of empathy, patience, and storytelling. Through her own journey, Lena had gained the ability not only to learn English but also to inspire confidence in others. Teaching Ravi reinforced her skills, deepened her understanding, and created a profound sense of fulfillment. Finally, the day came when Ravi could hold a short conversation confidently. Lena watched with quiet joy as he shared a story about his day, using full sentences, correct pronunciation, and expressive gestures. The pride on his face mirrored the pride Lena had felt on her first public speech. She realized that this was the true reward of learning, the ability to connect, inspire, and empower others. The lessons she had learned through fear, persistence, and practice were now multiplying, carried forward in Ravi's growing confidence. Lena smiled as their session ended. She knew that Ravi's journey had just begun, but she also understood that he had taken a decisive step forward, speaking his first full sentence with courage and clarity. The power of storytelling, the patient guidance of a mentor, and the consistent practice of English had transformed not only her life but also someone else's. Through empathy, encouragement, and shared experience, Lena had become a bridge for another learner, proving that learning and courage are contagious, and that every small effort can create a ripple of hope and achievement. The journey forward. Lena sat by her window one evening, the warm light of the sunset spilling across her small room. She reflected on the path she had walked, the shy, uncertain girl who had once feared speaking a single word in English, who had trembled before her first lesson, and who had doubted every small achievement. It was hard to believe that this was the same person now smiling at her notebook, full of sentences she could read, write, and speak with confidence. The journey had been long, filled with moments of frustration, embarrassment, and self-doubt, yet it had also been filled with courage, persistence, and small victories that now felt monumental in hindsight. She thought about the first days of her practice, when every sentence seemed impossible, and every word felt like a mountain to climb. She remembered the moments of loneliness, when she wondered if anyone else understood her struggle, when speaking to classmates or joining an English club filled her with anxiety. She remembered the awkward mispronunciations, the pauses, and the stumbles that made her want to hide. And yet, it was in those very moments, through persistence and determination, that she began to find a voice, not just in English, but in herself. The contrast between past and present was remarkable. Fear had slowly transformed into freedom. Each small step, watching story-based videos, repeating sentences aloud, attending her first English club, mentoring Ravi, had added a brick to the bridge that connected her limitations to new possibilities. The voice that once whispered doubt now spoke with quiet authority, not just in language, but in self-belief. Lena realized that English had become more than just words. It had become a tool for connection, expression, and empowerment. She thought of Ravi, her beginner learner, now able to form full sentences with confidence. She remembered the glow in his eyes the first time he spoke clearly, the joy of seeing someone else grow because she had once dared to take small steps. That moment reinforced the truth that learning is not only personal, it is communal. Courage is contagious, and confidence multiplies when shared. Lena understood that her struggles had become lessons, her mistakes had become guidance, and her persistence had become inspiration for others. Her mind wandered to the moments of failure that had once seemed insurmountable, the online interview that went poorly, the mispronounced words in her first speech, the times she felt she was taking 2 steps back for every one forward. Those setbacks had felt unbearable in the moment, yet they had shaped her resilience. Each failure had been a teacher, reminding her that discomfort was part of growth, that mistakes were opportunities, and that persistence was the key to mastery. The contrast between despair and hope had driven her forward, teaching her to embrace the process rather than fear it. Lena recalled the times she had been on stage at the community event, heart racing, palms sweating, wondering if she could deliver a sentence without faltering. The memory brought a smile, because she had done it. She had spoken with clarity, intention, and emotion, and had received applause not just for words, but for courage. That experience had reinforced a powerful truth: fear is temporary, but action creates lasting change. Every nervous breath, every careful pronunciation, had been a step toward freedom. She considered the opportunities that had opened up since then. Teaching English online to students around the world, connecting with people she never would have met, exploring new ideas, and dreaming bigger than she ever imagined, each opportunity had grown from the small seeds planted by consistent effort. English had become a bridge to a wider world, not just in career or travel, but in friendships, understanding, and self-expression. The language she had once feared had become a tool for freedom, a means to expand her horizons, and a source of joy. Most importantly, Lena recognized how much she had changed internally. The timid, hesitant girl who measured every word against fear was gone. In her place was someone who could embrace mistakes, encourage others, and approach challenges with curiosity rather than dread. She had learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. Every story she had read, every sentence she had repeated, every person she had helped had contributed to her emotional resilience, her self-belief, and her sense of purpose. As she looked out at the horizon, Lena felt a sense of excitement for the future. She imagined the next steps she would take, new stories to read, conversations to have, and learners to guide. She imagined herself traveling, sharing ideas, and connecting across cultures. Every small effort she had made in the past had built the foundation for limitless possibilities ahead. The freedom she now felt was not just about speaking English, it was about embracing life with confidence, openness, and courage. She turned back to her notebook, pen in hand, ready to write a new story. Her story was no longer just about learning English, it was about transformation, perseverance, and the power of small steps taken consistently. And she knew that anyone watching, listening, or learning alongside her could do the same. Each sentence learned, each word practiced, each conversation attempted was a step toward personal freedom. The path was open, and the first step was always the most important. With a deep breath, Lena whispered to herself and to anyone following her journey, "Start your English journey today." Every small step brings freedom. The words carried the weight of experience, hope, and encouragement. They were simple, yet profound. They were an invitation to action, a reminder that growth begins with courage, and that every learner has the power to transform fear into confidence, limitation into empowerment, and hesitation into opportunity. Lena closed her notebook, a calm smile on her face, ready for whatever came next. The journey had shaped her, challenged her, and freed her, and now it was only just beginning. Every learner could take that first step, and in doing so, discover a world of possibilities waiting beyond fear. Thank you for watching Lena's incredible journey with us here at Easy English Official. Her story shows that every small effort, every sentence practiced, and every step taken toward learning English can bring real change, not just in language skills, but in confidence, opportunities, and your life. Remember, it's normal to feel fear, make mistakes, and face setbacks. What matters is to keep going, just like Lena did. Every little step counts, and every challenge you overcome makes you stronger. If Lena's journey inspired you, now it's your turn. Start your English journey today. Practice with stories, speak aloud, repeat phrases, and don't be afraid of mistakes. You have the power to transform fear into courage, hesitation into action, and limitations into new possibilities. Share what you learn, help others along the way, and celebrate every small success. You'll see how far you can go. We upload a new video every day here, filled with motivating stories, useful English lessons, and practical tips to help you improve your listening, speaking, reading, and writing skills. Make sure to subscribe, click the bell icon, and join our community of learners who are turning small daily steps into real freedom and confidence. Leave a comment below and tell us, what small step will you take today to improve your English? We'd love to hear your story and cheer you on. Keep learning, keep practicing, and remember, every day is a new chance to grow. We'll see you in tomorrow's video, and until then, keep moving forward with courage, just like Lena.